let's talk about the reigning division champs, the Los Angeles Rams. Starting off, I mean, a lot of the focus is going to be on the defense, specifically the defensive line. Could you talk about, where this defensive line kind of sets itself apart, not only from the rest of the division, but maybe from the rest of the NFL?
Yeah, and I think it starts with Jared Verse and the fact that he's just an absolute man. My eval was off on him, openly admitted. I did not have him in my top 5 edges. He just looked like he was out of shape and wasn't, putting in the best effort and really only seemed like a power rusher rather than having that finesse juice that we see a lot of the top pass rushers have. But in the NFL, power matters more than finesse, and he leveraged that beautifully, so much to the point that Teron Armstead retired. He said, I went against Jared Verse, and right then I decided, yeah, this is my last year of football. So for a rookie to do that to a savvy veteran who is one of, not the best, but definitely a top 10 left tackle in his career while he played, speaks volumes to the type of player Verse is, and he just really unlocked the rest of this defensive line. So for Verse himself, he was 7th in pressure rate, 5th in pass rush win rate, 6th in true pass rush pressure rate, and 3rd in true pass rush win rate. So top 7 in a lot of categories. That makes a good pass rusher. He's also a very good run defender as well. And this is for all defensive linemen in the entire league. This isn't just edges. That's all D linemen. So Dexter Lawrence is up in that category. Chris Jones is up in that category, and he's ranking with those elite style defensive linemen as a rookie. So really cool to see that there. The rest of this D line really opened up. Michael Hoyt is kind of like a linebacker edge hybrid. He's now with the Bills, but he was used in a lot of unique ways. He was standing up, in between the guards rather than playing his normal edge position. They would either drop him into coverage or rush him on a stunt or just say, hey, use your speed and beat the center. He's gone now, but I wanted to mention him first because he got used really uniquely. Kobe Turner and Byron Young are 2 completely different players. Kobe's your big, beefy defensive tackle, and he played nose. Like, he was a nose tackle, but he didn't exclusively play nose. He was definitely getting widened out as well. They didn't really use a traditional nose in this defense, but when they had one, he was the guy. And Byron Young is their speed finesse edge. He's one of the fastest defensive linemen in the league. And that came up on tape a bunch. But the one guy I want to point out is rookie Braden Fisk. And I was admittedly really, really low on him coming out of the draft. I think he was in my bottom 75 players on the board. Uber athletic, decent strength. He's a horrible run defender, and he was still a horrible run defender this year. And the pass rush chops were not great. They weren't what you want a defensive lineman to have, especially when we talk about that power skill set. He doesn't have that, at least not. That's not his main go-to, right? So I didn't think he was going to pan out. Plus, he was 24 as a rookie. So I was like, there's not much more to improve on. But what the Rams do a great job of is they put guys in situations that weaponize their skill set. And they said, look, we have a guy who's 290 pounds, and he's already one of the most athletic defensive tackles in the league. Let's use that. Let's use him up and down the entire line. And Next Gen Stats had him at 44 pressures. PFF had him at 51. With NFL Pro, you just see the Next Gen rated pressures. So he had 44. So I wanted to break down and go through the splits of what those pressures were like. I went through and charted each individually. And it was kind of, my understanding of how the defense runs, of what I ranked as like, a sack, a stunt, when he was a looper, his alignment, I'm usually on par with some of these definitions, but they may differ. So it's not 100% perfect. This is just my perspective. So in terms of true pass rush rate, where he wasn't getting stunted, that's where he got half of his pressures, 22 of his pressures. The other 22 came during stunts, where he was either the looper and someone was knifing in and he was looping around them, or he was getting upfield in a rush or knifing across the line and someone was looping behind him. So that's where he got the other 50% of his pressures. He had a 22.7% sack rate off those pressures, which is actually pretty decent. And that includes half sacks, strip sacks, full sacks, everything like that. His hurry rate outside of that was 73%, roughly under that, and then a QB hit rate of 4.5. So a good spread of pressures. His miss sack rate is like the one alarming thing. He had a 20.45 miss sack rate, and a lot of those were solo sacks where he was the first one there and missed. And a good chunk of those came within the first 3 games of the season against the Lions, Cardinals, and 49ers, he had 6 missed sacks in the first 3 games of his career. So we're looking at a completely different player if he makes half of the sacks in the first half of the season, and then he missed 3 others as the season went along. So
can I ask you a question on those sacks?
Go for it.
So I mean, you talk about that missed sack rate. I mean, is that one of those stats though that you kind of had to go in and like watch the tape and kind of reevaluate each of those missed sacks? Because I mean, there's probably a balance right between like missed sacks on elusive quarterbacks and then just like a really bad attempt. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, those missed sacks came against Kyler Murray and Brock Purdy, who were 2 of the best quarterbacks at avoiding pressure. And Kyler made him look like a JV football player in that week 2 game. So there is that perspective to it, right? But of 3 of those sacks, he had the quarterback wrapped up, and the quarterback was able to wiggle out. So like, and 3 of the others, he was looping and coming around the corner and would not break down, and the quarterback would just step up and he'd be sliding and extending his arm out. So it's like, as he went along, those missed sack stops. He had 6 in the first 3 weeks. The rest of the season, he only missed 3 sacks after that. So like, he got better at controlling his speed, controlling his momentum around the bend, and being able to haul in these quarterbacks, right? And the rest of his missed sacks were on Geno Smith, Tua, and then Brock Purdy again. So again, mobile quarterbacks who know how to mitigate pressure. And then in terms of where he lined up, he actually had a really good split for someone of his skill set. He was over the guard in like a 2-eye or 3-tech 34% of the time. He was over the tackle either in a 4-eye, 4 or 5-tech 34% of the time. And then he was outside of the tackle in a 5-tech or wide 9 32% of the time, which that's a really high rate for a defensive tackle. But it's how they ran this front. They really ran a 5-man front more often than not because of all the different skill sets. I mean, they have 5 really good pass rushers, and they didn't have great linebackers. So you're like, screw it, we're going to have 1 linebacker in, 5 guys rushing up front, and we have a decent secondary, so we'll just let them perform. And then on top of that, yes, they lost Michael Hoyt, but now they added Poona Ford, who's vastly underrated and such a fun guy to watch, and Ty Hamilton, who's a pretty decent, depth piece for this defensive interior. So I think they brought in a defensive tackle in free agency and drafted one because they're going to plan to use Fisk more on the edge. So you'll have an edge rotation of Verse, Byron Young, and Fisk, and then an interior of Kobe Turner, Poona Ford, and Ty Hamilton with some inside-out flexibility from Braden Fisk. And honestly, Jared Verse can move inside too if you wanted to get a mismatch somewhere.
Absolutely. And what does a guy like Poona Ford add to this defensive line?
He's a bit undersized, kind of like Braden Fisk, but he's got a lot of juice as a run defender. Like, his balance through double teams and reach blocks is some of the best in the league. He's also got some decent pass rush juice, and it seems like he's gotten better every single year. Like, he's not a superstar. Some might not even consider him a star, but any D line that he's been on has been better because of him being there. Like, it's very rare that he makes a mistake, but it's also very rare that he makes a big splash play. So he kind of gets lost by the wayside when we talk about, the top defensive tackles in this league. Like, I don't think he's top 12, but he's definitely in that top 20 conversation of interior defensive linemen. And I think he's going to fit in perfectly in this pass rush unit. And we're going to see a big breakout year from him because of how versatile the rest of the D line is to open up stunts and be used all over. We could see Poona Ford playing the edge too, just based on his athleticism.
Yeah. And let's break down, where the Rams were before the bye and after the bye. Obviously, before the bye, they really struggled on both sides of the ball. But after the bye, they became a much more efficient team, both offensively and defensively. Could you talk about maybe some categories in which they really made huge jumps and allowed themselves to make that final playoff push?
Absolutely. And as we've done all season, or all series, we're going to use the EPA metrics. So offensively, 18th in EPA per play, 22nd in EPA per drop back, and 4th in EPA per rush for weeks 1 through 5. So besides the rush number, below average in total play and drop back EPA. After the bye, they jump up to 13th in EPA per play, 9th in EPA per drop back, and they actually dropped in rush from 4th to 22nd. So that's why, like, and rushing EPA is typically negative as it is, because negatively, like, or runs negatively impact offenses for the majority of offenses in the league, which is why EPA is technically a negative stat when you run the ball. But when you're good at it, it heightens your offense, right? So, much better in the pass game, much better overall. Run game took a step back, and I think that's just Kyron Williams is not an efficient runner. Like, he's going to make tackles miss, but he's not going to get a lot of yards after contact. He's not going to have explosive runs. He's going to run within the system, and that's why the Rams love him, is that he runs duo really, really well. He runs blast really well, power and counter, but he gets the yards that are there, and he's not really able to create outside of that. But they don't mind that, it seems like. Which we'll talk a little bit about the running game a little bit later. But then in terms of defense, this is really where we saw a huge shift. In the first 5 weeks, they were 32nd in EPA per play allowed. They were the worst defense. 31st in EPA per dropback allowed, second worst. And 30th in EPA per rush allowed, third worst. So horrible defense in the first 5 weeks. After the bye, they made some adjustments. They started to move Braden Fisk around. They started using Jared Verse to start the stunts rather than be a looper. And they jumped to 12th in EPA per play allowed, so 20 spots. 16th in EPA per dropback, they jumped 15. And 14th in EPA per rush allowed, they jumped 16. So much, much, much better defense in the second half, and they have room to improve going into 2025. And like I said earlier, they started using more five-man fronts out of nickel and dime and running a lot of stunts and blitz packages out of that. They moved Braden Fisk around, and they just ran more stunts and blitz packages, which really opened up this defense and allowed the secondary to have more time to just kind of stay with the guys in man coverage, get to their zone drops, and just let the front 5 or 6 do what they needed to do to pressure quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. Offensively, where do you feel like this team made some adjustments?
Offensively, I just think sticking to more of the power run concepts, like I mentioned, but also utilizing more condensed formations and play actions, right? Like, also Cooper Kupp missed some time. So when Kupp came back and he was healthy and Puka was healthy, those two were great in tandem together. And that's when you saw this offense really explode and take advantage of defenses. Tutu Atwell was like a fun wide receiver 4 to watch this year. It has the past 2 years. He got a really good deal for a wide receiver 4. I don't know what his usage is going to be going into the season now that Cooper Kupp is gone and he's with the Seahawks, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think condensing the formations and giving Matt Stafford more blockers to give him more time to just kind of manipulate defenses with his eyes and make these reads and progressions really expanded on this passing attack as we got deep into the season. And this, I know the first half wasn't great for them, but they gave the Eagles a run for their money in that NFC divisional round. And they were the only team that really gave them a fit. Besides the Commanders, but Jalen Hurts missed that game, so I don't really count that. But really, since week 6, no offense had really given them issues like the way the Rams did in that NFC divisional round.
Absolutely. And let's get into your dark horse for the Rams, tight end Terrence Ferguson. People have been very high on him in training camp. What do you like out of him, and where do you feel like he can also further elevate this Rams offense?
He's like Tyler Higbee, who the Rams have, but more athletic. I think a better receiver, and just as good of a blocker. And he's going to improve throughout his career. I think he's the perfect tight end for this type of offense that likes to run a lot of condensed formations, a lot of 12 personnel. They like to move tight ends. And I think he's got the athleticism to be a move tight end or an H-back, or you can split him out in the slot. Like, there's a lot of fun ways he can use them. He's just a big body guy that Stafford can look to. They're losing that. They don't really have the size in the receiver room, so they utilize that with their tight ends, and he's perfect for that. And he's going to get schemed open frequently, which when he was at Oregon, that's when he thrived on his targets, which like people will see that as a downgrade. Like, I didn't like Jadavion Sanders coming out of Texas last year because he was getting schemed open a lot. But that's not necessarily a bad thing when you're good on your scheme catches. Terrence Ferguson was great after the catch on his scheme targets and making guys miss and running through guys. JT Sanders, I didn't think was as good in that category, so I had a lower grade on JT. Different draft classes, but I had a lower grade on JT for that same reason. But it's not a bad thing, and they do a lot of design targets for tight ends in this offense. He should thrive. I don't know if he's going to start at all this year, but I think he's going to get at least the bare minimum 40% of tight end snaps in this offense and do something with it on maybe a quarter of those.